I'm so excited to have you here. I've been wanting to, we had a informal conversation where I learned a little bit more about your personal background, and I was telling our team you are on top of my list. I really think this will be a great opportunity for everyone to get to know you.
Looking forward to the conversation as well. It's always great to talk about the background and connecting to what you're doing here at UFA broadly.
So as you know, the series is called International Exchange, and this is an opportunity for anyone watching to get to know the international side of the university, in addition to personal stories that tend to be international, and you are among those, of course.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a very, very small town. The street in front of our house didn't even have asphalt. And that was a very interesting experience growing up. It was not anything big. That was the small town that I grew up in. It's called Tanjavur. It's a small town in Tamil Nadu. My college was also very near that town. It's about 60 kilometers from there, from Tanjavur. So it was a fantastic experience overall growing up, and it's a fabulous community to be there.
Well, I recall in some of your other interviews, you talked about how you come from a line of education administrators. So what was that like in that part of the world?
Absolutely. My great-granddad instituted this school called ER High School, which is in Trichy. This was about 125 years ago. It's still producing students.
Wow.
And impacting the community at large. On the other side, my great-granddad was a physics teacher in a high school, and he moved on to teach in a medical college, from what I know. So I come from that lineage, and I've been impacted, and I've seen the impact those people have had, even though I've not seen them personally, but seen their impact. And when others talk about how great of teachers they were, it's very inspiring, and hopefully I can be impactful as well.
Well, I want to talk more about how that translates to your role as a leader, but I want to go back because you mentioned that your family really were education administrators within India. Were you the first in your family to study abroad or pursue graduate education?
So I have a very, very large family.
Where do you draw the line? Okay.
Yeah, so where do you draw the line? So if I go to pretty much any city in the US, I have relatives there. To give you one example, the first city I landed here was in Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right. I had relatives in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so what I would do is I was horrible at cooking. I would drive down to Lincoln, Nebraska from Omaha every weekend, grab some stuff from my aunt there, and then we would come back, and that was how I managed my week.
So clearly you were not the first to come, but what made you decide to pursue or further your studies in the United States then?
I've always valued a graduate degree here in the US. My father had instilled that concept of having a graduate degree. But I came here to do work, as I was mentioning. At Omaha, I was working with this company called Conagra. There, it was a software engineering job, but I was always looking to do a grad degree. My earlier focus was at the master's level, was not thinking about this as a PhD at all. Had applied to Carnegie Mellon for the master's program. I was going there for an experience in one of the top schools in the country to understand how things worked, to think about startups and others. That was my drive. So that's how I ended up in the education sector.
So within Eller, I know you have a number of international students. I don't know if they know that you were once an international student. What was it like for you being an international?
So more than anything else, every small aspect of coming here was different. I remember very clearly, and I heard about a similar comment made by someone else. The first day I landed here in the US, I didn't know how to open the door. The locks in the door, I had a key, so just didn't know.
How do you open a door in India?
Because the keys and the structure in which the key is set up is slightly bit different.
Okay.
And my priors were based off of that, and I was trying to open the door and couldn't open that. And fortunately, I had the taxi driver who was still there, and I said, "Can you open the door for me?" And he opened the door. I gave him my key. So those small things make a huge impact in terms of how you get acclimatized to. It took me about I can say 3-4 years. I was single at the time. It took me about 3-4 years just to settle in. I would have dreams of missing my parents and all of that in those time frames. It was tough, but it was definitely worth it. Now I don't think about it as much, but
Clearly.
it was fun time because you cherished going back to India. You enjoyed that time frame, but at the same time you had to get things done here.
Well, I think even that simple story of opening the door is very reassuring, if not inspiring, for our international students who struggle and often question whether or not, that if they're able to be successful, given the challenges, they put the burden on themselves, and to know that's actually quite common, sadly, that many international students struggle through in just trying to adjust. What about academically? Was there any shifts in terms of how you studied or expectations compared to India?
Sure. So academically, it was a unique situation for me, but may not be the case for many others. I had not studied for 2 years. I was working for 2 years between when I completed my undergraduate and when I started.
So this is in Nebraska.
In 1 year in India, 1 year in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when I got back into academia at that point, I struggled a little bit. Partly because, for example, I was really good at math even before. But when I came back in, I had forgotten many of the elements regarding differentiation and integration, the calculus broadly. I was also overwhelmed, partly because I was not staying in touch with the academic aspect. And it wasn't hard eventually to get over that hurdle, but going through it was a little bit of challenge. And as a foreigner coming in, there was this uncertainty about how you're going to do well to maintain your visa status. Thinking about what the future can be was always in the back of my mind when in the early stages of my time here.
So you may not know this, but prior to this current position, I studied international students, and among the areas was areas of adjustment and educational success. And we would think that an international student who goes on probation, for example, and it sounds like you didn't go on probation, but for those who struggle academically, isn't because they were underprepared, but it has to do with a lot of the areas that you touch upon, social isolation, integrating to culture, concerns about being able to stay in the United States and whether or not they can make plans to stay in the United States. And all of these stressors are happening at the same time, in addition to the demands of being in class. And I believe, if you have your own international students watching this, I think they would feel reassured to know, oh, my dean understands what I'm going through.
Absolutely. And you add to that mix these uncertainty regarding whether you can pay out the loan in many cases people take, right? There are these social elements and those elements that you are facing as you're there, but also in many cases, the loans are underwritten by family members, and you feel even more stressed because of that to say, hey, am I imposing more on my dad or my uncle if I'm not delivering on the academic aspect of it? So certainly these are important issues and important challenges. The only advice I would give for a student in that position is to say, be mentally tough. Everything will be okay. You can get through this. I had a fantastic advisor who helped me through it because I had come from a work environment to my student status. For example, I was waiting for my F1 visa to come through, but I could still continue to do my studies. That was perfectly fine. But the university could not pay me. And that was a tough time for me because I had mentally developed, I had no loans for my parents that my parents needed to cover, but I was very worried about whether I could survive in the US. This was the first semester as a grad student. And fortunately for me, my advisor was very helpful. It's about going and having those conversations with those people, like the advisor, like the faculty member, and they almost always can figure out a pathway that's safe and that's meaningful, and that might alleviate some of the concerns as well.
Right. You touched upon several things that I think our viewers may not know is that international students are not permitted to work more than 20 hours a week. And while they really have the drive and the skill set to work, sometimes those opportunities just don't come in the same way they do for our local students.
Absolutely. And that also connects back to how they should be preparing and thinking about themselves. There are subtle differences between how Americans communicate as opposed to how international students communicate. And this is something that I didn't realize when I started the grad program. What I felt is important was the way in which these issues are communicated have an impact in terms of the student's ability to get placements, job offers, and the whole nine yards there, right? Just to give you my 2 cents on how I view this, I can at least comment about this from India versus the US perspective. Indians tend to get to the point very quickly, very fast, and be done with that comment right away. And the importance of the message, therefore, is not getting highlighted often. But when the folks who have grown up in the US, when they describe some of the stuff, they describe it in a much more elaborate and detailed way. And that illustrates the issue much more clearly to the person who's listening to it.
So another big area in my research that I found is among the biggest challenges for our international students is homesickness. What was that like for you? Or did you experience homesickness?
Oh, absolutely. It was very tough. In India, you would celebrate those big events. Some of the events like Diwali are celebrated as a community broadly. Everywhere you go, you would have the firecrackers, people coming in and giving sweets and all of that. I had to come to the US just before Diwali, few weeks before Diwali.
And you came alone, right?
I came alone,
Yeah.
right. So this was for work I had come, but that kind of an aspect that was missed never went away. Even though you do celebrate Diwali in as a group, as a community, as a small community, but that being so prevalent, so being very visible everywhere, that was something that I missed. And every Diwali, for the next few Diwalis, I would be thinking about being able to make a trip back to India to be able to enjoy that time frame. So those were the things that you missed, the small things, hanging out with family on those occasions. Looking for that specific kind of Indian food that your mom made. It's never easy to go to a restaurant and ask for that similar item because it never tastes like how your mom makes it.
Right.
So those were the things that were extremely difficult.
How did you overcome your own feeling of, not being at home, and that emptiness is what it feels
Absolutely.
like?
That's where the friends circle that you build, being here, is very, very critical. We had a group of friends. We would get together. I was connected with pretty much most of the Indians in Carnegie Mellon, which is a very small university. At the graduate program level, all the Indians we had some connection or the other. We would get together, have cookouts, share dishes and things like that. So that's how we got together, and it alleviated a lot of that. Right, as young people growing up there was a lot of that growing up together that was very powerful for us at that stage.
Well, and it's not even just the opportunity to come together and share, but to connect with individuals who are also very much feeling what you're feeling and longing for that connection and feeling of home.
Absolutely. And that became a big part for us to get together. We would also watch cricket matches. Cricket is a big thing in India. So we would get together and watch some of the games and all of that. So it was more of a social aspect that alleviated some of those homesickness that we would have. Certainly, that's something I would encourage new students coming in to consciously develop.
Yes, international students, very much we've seen over the years and in the research how they come together, even from very diverse places. I mean, India being quite diverse, and it sounds like those from all different kinds of regions probably participated. But also the shared experience of being an international, it really does provide a lot of comfort and support.
Absolutely.
In the midst of struggle on occasion.
Absolutely. And many of the struggles that we encountered were very similar. And so you could sense a build a camaraderie relationship with all these people who are going through similar experiences as well.
So I read up a little bit more on your educational background, and I saw that you were pursuing your PhD, but also picked up on a couple of masters along the way, and one in philosophy. Is that right?
My PhD is from a public policy school. So I did my undergrad in engineering. I joined here to do a PhD in a public policy school.
And why public policy from engineering?
Just it so happened that my advisor called me and wanted me to pursue a PhD, and I wanted to explore what that looked like.
Okay.
But what was more valuable was also that I was able to connect the engineering aspect, the STEM aspect, with the policy aspect, which is not necessarily STEM, but thinking about economics and behavioral elements and others. When I look back at what made me set apart, was this breadth in the way I've been trained. I took classes which were related to glass ceiling for women. I took classes related to drug policy, how should we be implementing policies. So these were classes that I would not have been exposed if it was a typical engineering school alone. So what I encourage students to do is to reach out, see what other things are available on campus, and there are always very many exciting things. And this is also I emphasize when I talk to the grad students here, and broadly even to the undergraduate students, there are so many exciting things around the campus at U of A. Think about the Observatory Center, Stewart Observatory Center. We have the Mirror Lab. We have some of the spectacular people who work on James Webb Telescope and OSIRIS-REx and all of that. I encourage our students to go and expand their horizon, interfacing and interacting with them. It helps them think about things differently, being able to tie what they're learning from their degree with other things as well.
How do you think a business degree is different than it was maybe a decade or so ago? What are the demands that students need to be thinking about now that they maybe had not had to think about 10, 20 years ago?
It's a very well-known thing, how AI, data analytics, and others are becoming heavily used everywhere, including in businesses. An individual who's familiar, who understands those AI and the technical aspects, who can connect on the business aspect of things as well, is going to be much, much more successful in terms of their career. So as students are coming in, that's exactly what we try to emphasize. The ecosystem and the environment we are going to be in requires quite a bit of knowledge about the technical aspects, but also at the end of the day, it has to add value to whoever it is, whether it's your customers, whether it is to yourself, or whether it is to the community. You've got to be able to identify what that value is. And lastly, but not least, you also have to communicate what that is, right? And explain to them what the value proposition of doing certain things are. So all the three elements, from a technical standpoint, from a value proposition standpoint, and from an explanation standpoint, all these three are important.
Can we talk about Eller's international activities? What are you most excited about? Where do you see Eller going in this global space we share?
So Eller has a large number of international students coming in and being enrolled in our programs. Many of our master's programs have a large, substantial body of group coming from large countries like India, China, and others. We also have programs that are in these international micro campuses, Indonesia, Cambodia, Peru, as a few examples of them. As an international person myself, I'm passionate about the value of international perspectives in making any organization elevate to the next level. So that's something that is something I'm super particular about. It is great for our students who may be domestic Arizona students to get exposed to international students coming in and interacting with them. So it's all that a whole big circle that everyone benefits from these international efforts as well.
So I know that Eller, your college, sends quite a number of students through our study abroad programs. Anything you want to share about that?
Oh, certainly. So our students go take classes in various different countries as part of study abroad programs. We also have managed global cohort engagements that we do. Those are fantastic experiences because here you are learning a different culture, interacting with others in the community, not just your own fellow students, but also broadly in the community. Everything that I said about myself as I'm coming here and experiencing, challenges with even locking the door or opening the door, the students here can experience that when they go and study abroad. And it just broadens your perspective. And I would encourage our students to pursue those kinds of engagements.
What you just shared exemplifies so much of what colleges are doing, which is attracting international students throughout the world, providing a transnational education to parts of the world where international students may not be able to afford to come or may wish to stay home. And then, of course, providing opportunities for our domestic students to have an international experience abroad. And all of this tied to your curriculum in ways that can enhance a student's experience and to be able to apply these concepts to other cultures and parts of the world.
Absolutely. And this is why the AZI and international office is very critical for any university to be able to have an outreach arm to different parts of the world that's mutually beneficial, both for our students to use what you provide, but also having a pipeline to attract those students to come in here as well.
Okay, I love this part. We close by asking all of our interview guests the same questions. And I will start by asking you, Karthik, can you give me a favorite expression in a language other than English, and what does that expression mean?
It's called Seivada Tirundachai.
I can't even pronounce that. Say that slowly, please.
Seivada Tirundachai.
Okay.
So whatever you do it the best.
So I love food and I love hearing about what people love to eat. If you can eat anything every day, what would that be?
It's the Indian milk sweets. They are amazingly tasty, amazingly unhealthy, but that's what I like.
Can you get it here or?
You do, but it's a hit. It's sometimes hit or miss. So
okay.
You usually get it from Indian stores.
Okay, we'll look for it.
If they are bad, then they don't taste as well.
Okay, they're called milk sweets.
Milk sweets.
Okay, I'll look for that. Thank you. So I know you're well-traveled, and if you can go anywhere back, just pick one, where would you go back?
New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Because the country is so beautiful, so pristine, and just I have driven both the North Island and the South Islands. Both are beautiful. The roads are great. And the best part is the food with the vegetarian option were phenomenally great.
So the final question, and maybe a harder question, is can you name a place that you haven't been that you hope to go to someday?
There is a bucket list of places we want to visit. On top of that list is our visit to Iceland. So we would ideally like to go. That's a place that my family wants to go see, possibly even the Northern Lights there.
So I was there last summer. I highly recommend it. We rented a car and we did the entire ring road. So I would very much recommend that, but maybe not to see the Northern Lights in pure dark. But summer is highly recommended.
We'll definitely keep that in mind as we think about and plan for that.
Great. Thanks for the interview and thanks for the time.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure to come and talk with you.